I'm Robert Lelieuvre, Distinguished Professor of Psychology, retired from the University of Great Falls. And I've been interested in sci-fi and science fiction all my life. But I read an interview with Kenneth Ring in the mid-90s about his research at the University of Connecticut and found that it was one of the most fascinating psychological analyses of abductees, contactees, and sighters. And I delivered a lecture to the nurses at the Northeastern Health Board in Ireland the year I was there as senior clinical psychologist on the UFO and abduction phenomenon. One of the nurses said, do you teach this? And I said, no, I probably should. It was a sort of a latent part of my thinking. So I came back in 2003 and began a summer course called UFO Encounters and Alien Abductions, and decided I would also do a small preliminary replication of Ring's findings to see whether or not the data holds. And some does. The vast majority do hold, but some of the key findings around dissociation don't hold. And so I'm working with MUFON now in the Abduction Experiences Research Committee and teaching the course on the University of Great Falls distance education platforms starting in the fall. So it's something that's been with me, but it was only in the last, I'd say 12 to 14 years that I decided as a tenured faculty member, I didn't have to worry about politically correct research, politically correct statements, and got a tremendous amount of support from the university for doing the research and also doing the course. And the course is a good seller for both undergraduate and graduate students. How extensive is the scientific information or data on abduction? It's fast becoming an area of greater interest in the social sciences. It still lacks, I think, a significant body of empirical evidence. What happens is you get a study like the Rodinger study or a study like Ring and Rosen, and people respond to it. But the responses tend to be what I call Lelieuvre's second law of research. For every finding, there's an equal but opposite finding. People react and try to poke holes in the data. And that's not to say that there aren't holes in the data. But I would say in the last 20 years, the number of social scientific and quality humanities studies of the phenomenon are increasing every year. I think there are probably 75 fairly well-designed, internally valid studies in the area. But when you consider that eyelid conditioning in learning theory has probably 75,000 studies, it's still got a way to go. I think we deal with a person who reports an abduction the same way we deal with anyone who has had a stressful conflict, a trauma-ridden experience. I think my graduate students say it best, that without exposure to the field, without exposure to the abduction literature, they would tend to probably class the description as some kind of delusional experience. But if you listen closely, and listening becomes, of course, the important part of any kind of therapeutic intervention, one can hear exactly what the person is saying and to respond with respect. You're always dealing with a delicate balance, I think, of underbelief and overbelief as a therapist. And striking the balance is what's crucial. You cannot reject the person. You cannot necessarily accept every single word as gospel truth. But if you're working and trusting the person and they're working and trusting you, you create the narrative of the experience in a way that's comfortable for them so you don't re-traumatize them, and also give you more and more information, more and more knowledge, and hopefully you convert that to wisdom and have that as a basis for dealing with the next abductee you see. I think there's also the issue of having a balance in the practice. I've always been a person that wanted to be eclectic in what I did in terms of therapy or teaching. And I think having a number of different kinds of people who have experienced trauma of different types allows you to bring to each of the areas the knowledge and the understanding from the other areas. And so having that rich clinical practice is important before you actually deal with your first case. I think from my own experience dealing with that experience and that report is to first and foremost accept what the person is saying, to accept it verbally, accept it non-verbally, communicate that to the person, and allow the person to report, talk, and elaborate the experience in a way that's comfortable for them. My sense is that too often, like the graduate students before they take the course, they're going to try to fit that person into one of the delusional disorder categories in the diagnostic and statistical manual. But if they see and hear and read about the experience, then I think they can approach it much more open-mindedly. In the 32 or 3 people with whom I've worked in the last year, mostly in a research capacity, there's hardly one that I would doubt the report on. There's one that's pretty extreme, but then again, she clearly has details that are important to understand about abduction, and some of the details are known, some of them are less well known. There's an extreme kind of quality to her report, but I would say that the estimates of 60 to 70 to 80% of abduction reports are real experiences. And to class it as something that is a delusion, something that is not real, is not only disrespectful to the person with whom you're working, it's closing your eyes to a real event that appears to be happening to a large number of people. And I don't walk well in the world, I don't ride my bicycle well in the world with my eyes closed. The psychological effect of Roswell is one of those great ironies and paradoxes, okay? Its effect is much more powerful the further you get away from Roswell geographically. I don't know how many people who live in this city, and I'm new to the city, okay, say, oh yeah, I heard about that. And as you move further away, the event takes on more importance and more meaning. And I think that relates to the fact that there has not been the kind of attention at many levels of education to the event. The idea of these little half-hour workshops introducing ufology to the general public here in the Lopez room, I think is the first step in the right direction. I think that as you move further away from the city of Roswell, it becomes more salient to people. And again, there's 2 sides to that coin. Wow, Roswell. You're going to retire at Roswell? Roswell. And the closer you get to the epicenter of the city, the same kind of phenomenon. I walked out of the grocery store with a young woman pushing my cart, and I had my 60th anniversary cap on. She said, "Oh, aliens, you don't believe in that, do you?" I said, "Well, I'm on the committee, and I do research." Oh, she said, "I'm sorry, sir." I said, "No, but come down to the workshops, take a look at it. How old are you?" 20. "What do you know about it?" Not a lot. But I think the experience is so salient to ufology. It is essentially the gold standard. And I like the idea that people are debating the event. I like that kind of healthy skepticism. But for me, Roswell, each year, since the mid 70s, more and more information is coming forward about the event. And as Stan Friedman said in this morning's paper, we're running a race with the Undertaker, and we're losing because the Undertaker always wins. Time is growing short for more witnesses to come forward. But in addition to witnesses, there needs to be a concerted effort among all the disciplines to really understand not only the psychology of the event, but the ongoing rippling psychological effect of that event, any other event that relates to crashes, crash retrievals, or abductions. I would suggest that public high schools add readings in the area to their civics course or their history course. But I fought that battle around Vietnam. It took us 5 years to get the high schools to add more than an hour's coverage of the Vietnam experience. It was like, oh yeah, Vietnam happened. Let's go on to other important events in American history. Oh yeah, Roswell happened. So I think the more and more people are exposed to it, the more and more people hear that it's an event, it is a real event. Whatever it was, it's important to treat it open-mindedly. But we live in a culture that I think doesn't give a lot of time and thought to things that are outside of their nomological network. I mean, my life is my college career, getting a job, making money. My life is a social network on Facebook, MySpace. And if there's a way to use those social network sites in new and innovative ways to focus on Roswell and the revelations of Roswell, what has it told us about ourselves? Both in terms of the possibility that we're not alone and how we handle disconcerting information that challenges the way we see things and challenges our worldview. I don't know whether the world changed in 1947 or not. I know that the world is changing now, and in large part, it is a quest for answering the question, are we alone? But it's also the realization that there may be other intelligences that are involved with us. Are they trying to influence us? Are they observing us? Are they setting out to colonize us? I think you need a balance of the X-Files with some skepticism to really approach the significance of Roswell and the significance of the greater contact experience. And we have to address it from a number of dimensions. One of my sadnesses is that we have 3 conferences going on here in Roswell this weekend, all of which have a crucial component to understanding the Roswell experience and the contact experience, the abduction experience. And I would love to be alive long enough to see those 3 conferences be a single, triply focused conference. And I'd like to think that was my mission, but I don't go on foolhardy missions. I think it's going to be a tough sell. I think there's a paradigm problem, a paradigm shift problem. I think you're absolutely right that we have tremendous difficulty as a species to integrate new information into our attitudes, our beliefs, our values, and that when that information is potentially transformative or potentially shattering, there's going to be a natural cognitive and emotional resistance to it. Milton Rokeach wrote 40 years ago about bimodal cognitive distribution in Western culture. One is the open mind, simple term. One is the closed mind. And we think closed-mindedness tends to be rigid. And we tend to think of it as conservative, potentially fascist. What he argues is that closed minds just can't adapt to new information. And one of the interesting ironies for me is some of the most closed-minded people that can't adapt to this information are the scientific community. Their paradigms are so well entrenched, and Thomas Kuhn has talked about that. He's talked about that. He's written about that. People have researched in social sciences what gets published in the journals. What gets published in the journals are things that support the mainstream thinking at the time. So you have the general kind of resistance to new information, new knowledge, new wisdom. You have the scientists pulling that at a greater and more significant level by debunking phenomena. But you do have the issue of, and again, the government cover-up. I mean, it doesn't take a person with a paranoid disorder. It doesn't even take a person like me who's a natural-born conspiracy theorist, okay, to think every time the government opens its mouth publicly, it shoots itself in the foot. And, you know, they don't learn from their experience either. Oh, it was a weather balloon. Oh, it wasn't. It was a Project Mogul balloon. Oh, it was the crash test dummies that weren't used until 4 or 5 years later, okay? Oh, it doesn't matter that the crash test dummies were 6 feet tall, and witnesses report something else. See, again, the phenomenon is so complex and so complicated. And this is a culture, and I'm not a social psychologist, I shouldn't really say this, but this is a culture that prides itself on always knowing where it's going and always being right. And 50% of the time, it hasn't got the vaguest idea of where it's going, and it's wrong. And that's not going to be any different when people try to come to terms with Roswell and any revelation that comes from Roswell. And if you add to that notion of the open and closed mind of Milton Rokeach, it's going to be a struggle. But I think the salience is building. I think more people now, and I have no data on that, and I shouldn't speak without data because I'm a psychologist, but I think we know that more and more people are seeing things. We know that there's an ever-increasing number of abduction reports. I would like to see someone, Roper or any of the pollsters, really deal with that acceptance question. Not do you believe it, because when you talk belief, people get scared. But to maybe just change that one question, is it possible for you to accept the possibility that, and see where that data takes us? It may not reveal anything new, considering all the polls that have been done over the last 50, 60 years, but I think you're going to see a slight increase in people for very different reasons, many different reasons, being more accepting. But Plato said that social change comes from the margins. So we don't want to make it a mainstream phenomenon yet, because then it will just be reified and rigidified the way other belief systems are and other political, philosophical systems are. We want those marginal insights of the experiencers, and we want that to slowly, I think, build acceptance. And anything we can do, you know, from U.F.O. hunters on television to fast walkers touched, courses. The least accepting people at the University of Great Falls for this course are their faculty. Not the students, not the provost and vice president for academic affairs, not the registrar. The president was had some reservations, but it was the faculty. You're what? Yes, I'm teaching a course on. You're going to tell them it's all bull, aren't you? No. I'm going to present the evidence, and I'm going to let them decide for themselves. Oh, I don't know about that, Lelieuvre. I just don't know about that. And yet, you know, now it's catching on among the faculty. And, you know, you're an expert when you're farther away from your home campus and 1,301 miles. Helps, I think, in the faculty accepting. So we'll see what happens over the next couple of years. My sense is that one of the other paradoxes in the culture is the fact that we see ourselves as such individuals, okay? and yet we also are very much concerned with what our colleagues are going to say about us, what our neighbors are going to say about us. And if we repeat things to ourselves long enough, I think it kind of dulls us. It kind of prevents us from being open to sharing those experiences. I'm new to Roswell. 2 years today I moved to Roswell. But the neighbors on my street are equally divided. Some say, what? Roswell? UFOs? Others say, you know, I've lived here for 40 years and I've heard a lot about it, but I'm not sure I know enough about it. What are you doing to learn more about it? They can't break out of that kind of fog, that kind of glue that holds them. You've got an incredible library of material here at the museum. I once heard it estimated as its second largest to the Vatican on UFOs, okay? None of the people who live on my street has visited the museum library. And I think, whoa, I mean, you talk about being dulled, hypnotized, being unable to break out of a paradigm, being concerned about not keeping up with the Joneses, but what will the Joneses say if they see me out in my backyard or at the park reading John Mack, reading Bud Hopkins, reading about transgenic beings and UFO invisibility. They're going to think I am. And so they freeze themselves in place. They can't break that kind of internal apprehension, internal anxiety, internal resistance. And I can forgive them. I mean, that's okay. It's up to us to educate them, okay? What's harder for me to forgive is for people in my discipline or any scientific discipline or the humanities or in spirituality, religion, etc., simply rejecting out of hand the possibility that this experience is real. I'm not even going to ask them to say it's probable, just that it's possible. And that's going to be a longer and harder struggle than getting my neighbors to see the other side of the coin, because people are convinced that they have the model, the discipline, the process to understand the world around them, and they'll fight to hold on to their beliefs. They'll fight to hold on to their paradigms if they're scientists. They'll fight to hold on to the accepted canon of knowledge, that's a struggle, and I think we need to confront that, and we each confront in our own way. Teaching students is one way to confront it, overcoming resistance of faculty. I don't have the energy to overcome the resistance of my neighbors. I just have to focus on those things and those folks I know will possibly open their mind a little bit. One of the things I love is going to the public library and saying, here's my library card, I need a hard copy of Ring and Rose in 1990. And being able to rely on the fact that in 2 to 3 weeks, I'll have it. Not all of the material in the area is electronically archived, which is unfortunate. But again, there's always a backup, always a thing to do. Go to your public library. Enroll for one continuing education course at a local university. You have library privileges. Our library at the University of Great Falls has every single text that I've ever used in the course. And I've given them a list of supplementals, and I found out that all of my when you look at the syllabus, you'll see supplemental readings. All of those now are in the library, at least one copy. I think the more I can expose people to different models of explanation of the phenomena, the better off they'll be in making that informed choice about where they're going to go with this knowledge. Ronald Lang in the 60s said, few books are forgivable. Few ideas are forgivable either. Once you've been exposed to them, you can't throw them out with the bathwater. They're there, and it'll take time to percolate them.